So me and Sheikh Yusuf Rios, we've been talking about George Floyd and how Muslims should view that, what our role should be in society in light of that, and how we can make change in American society. And we also talked about, the dynamics between like the immigrant Muslim community in America and indigenous Muslims, meaning convert Muslims or African-American Muslims that have been here generations, and how we should navigate all of that.
Okay. Let's get into it, man.
So, what do you think that as Muslims, our role should be in society to cause systemic change so that, police brutality ceases to be a thing we have to worry about, if it ever will be?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. These are very important questions. I think before even attempting to answer the question, I just want to take a second and commend you for asking the question. There was a long time, I've been practicing Islam, attempting to practice Islam, for the past 20 years, believe it or not. I know belies my age. I'm older than I look, you know what I'm saying? No, I'm just kidding. I'm old and I look old too. But I remember when, there was this almost taboo. It might be putting too sharp a point on it to call it a taboo, but it was like issues that directly impacted Black people were not considered legitimately Islamic issues. Right. So you could be concerned about Chechnya. You, of course, knew that you should be concerned about Palestine. You might be concerned about Kashmir. You might be concerned about something taking place in Lebanon or Morocco or Mali, but issues that directly impacted the social welfare of Black Americans, if one was concerned about those issues, you ran the risk of being labeled a nationalist or being labeled someone who had an insufficient or inadequate connection to real Islam. So just the fact that we could look at something like police brutality and recognize that, advocacy on behalf of the victims of police brutality and those who have to live perpetually evading the specter of police brutality, aggression, profiling, etc., that this is something that is an imperative of ours as a Muslim community. Man, we've come a long ways, man. We've come a very, very long ways, and this is something to celebrate. Often we talk about how deplorable things are in the Muslim community, and this is something that, mashallah, this is a very promising development. In terms of dealing with police brutality, there's two answers, really, I think. One is making sure people know their rights, making sure that, and we actually have the ability and we have the language and we have the framework to help people understand concepts of like basic human dignity, right? We also have language and frameworks that aid people in understanding our responsibility to each other. Of course, I wouldn't dare charge anybody with cowardice when, I think all of us have almost a Pavlovian response to police officers, right? But the fact that you didn't have a more vigorous, effort to, for someone to speak up there on the spot in defense of George Floyd's life, that no one, some people could be heard saying things, kind of faintly in the distance, but that nobody took a more forceful stance, I think is telling of an entire community that has capitulated to inhumane treatment at the hands of police. So I think, the first thing that we have to do is get the community to understand its own dignity and that it's not worthy of such treatment, and that such treatment is not a musallam, it's not a given that police treat people like this, and to maintain that one be treated with dignity and respect, and that police use the kinds of restraint you would expect them to use, seeing as though they're sanctioned by the state to carry weapons and use weapons, that the police would use the kind of restraint you would expect them to use with people whose lives and whose basic decency they respect and have regard for. I think we have language around that. And then the other thing is trying to, and this is kind of, I think, an answer that people that are looking for more radical solutions might look at and say, I mean, come on, I mean, what's that? But I think brokering conversations between law enforcement and community residents, this is not so, I mean, at the end of the day, the police are still, as it stands, I mean, people working on, defunding, police departments and things of that nature, that might be a long-term goal. And I'm not well enough informed about, the overall objectives and aims of that work to really make a substantive, comment about that work. Suffice it to say, though, if they're saying we can put less money into police and more money into community development, prima facie, I don't think anything is wrong with that. But as it stands, the police are a reality. And trying to create a platform or a space in which we can have more ta'aruf, we can have more, mutual knowing. I think it's very important, man. A lot of the, I live on the south side of Chicago, and the police officers that I worry about most in terms of their propensity toward violence or aggressive behavior when policing, or it's police officers that are really scared and lack exposure to a broad swath of our community that would enable them to see the humanity of the people that they work with, in their patrols and on their beats and etc. Man, this, not only is it deadly when we get this wrong, it's just a pernicious lie that all Black people, or more pointedly, all Black men are violent criminals that illegally carry firearms and won't hesitate to use them. And man, we're talking about a community of, hardworking men, hardworking women, homeowners that take great pride in where they live and who they are and the historic legacies of their communities. And some people, yeah, it's true, even if they knew those things, they wouldn't care, right? Yeah. But some people, they really don't know the community in this way.
It was kind of, it kind of struck me how you said that, this wasn't really seen as an issue that Muslims should care about before. Here in Minnesota, the overwhelming majority of Muslims are Black, mostly Somali, like over 90%. And so they've been harassed by the police. The FBI has harassed Muslims a lot in Minnesota, more than other states, because we had the highest number of people join ISIS and things like that. So for us, it was like, it was just a given. It was just an automatic thing. And I think a lot of people outside Minnesota don't know that Cup Foods was a halal store and a masjid.
Yeah.
George Floyd was killed in front of a masjid.
Yeah.
So for us, it was like all the Muslims were aware of what's going on and what needs to be done, and for us,
these issues, man, are really, I mean, I know some Muslims might be angry at some of what I'm about to say, but, I think for all of us, these issues of, where we stand with respect to Black communities and the criminal justice system, there are a number of probing questions that all of us need to ask, including Black people, man. when people talk about those oppressive, crack cocaine laws, and, a lot of people advocating for those laws were, Black people living in communities that were watching their communities brought to their knees, by this new drug, and you have a lot of Black people that, in private, talk about the riffraff in the neighborhood, and, when they attend, community meetings, talk to the aldermen about increasing police presence, and, we need to get tougher on crime. And so my point is that the Palestinian brother who owned the store and the Black sales clerk who called law enforcement, there's a gap, there's some dissonance between, experiencing some kind of harm or misconduct and wanting redress, which is a normal, my background is in Shari'a. The desire for redress when, a wrong or when harm occurs, that's a natural human inclination.
Right.
So, right. But understanding what picking up the telephone and calling law enforcement might mean in the case of Black people and Black men in particular, this is something we have to push ourselves to be cognizant of and act according to that cognizance. So, which might mean having people in communities that can intervene. We just got to get more personal. Because maybe there's somebody in the community we can call. Hey man, Big Floyd in here tripping, man. Y'all need to come get him, man. For
right.
Real, right? But we can't always pick up the phone and call law enforcement, man, because that's, consequences could be fatal.
The particular situation at Cup Foods is that it had been under FBI surveillance before George Floyd. And right behind it is a local criminal organization, like literally in the alleyway behind it, a gang operates.
But you got a lot of overlapping, tentacles. You know what I'm
complicated,
saying? Yeah.
So it was believed that this criminal organization was making counterfeit money. And the number one store that was not catching the counterfeit bills was Cup Foods. And the FBI told them, if you don't call the police when you get a counterfeit bill, we're going to prosecute you into the ground and destroy your business.
See, so there's a lot there.
And it's like, so they're put in this position. They're not really sure what to do. They had their employees go out 2 times to Mr. Floyd to try to get him to come in the store so that they could make this go away. Give me the goods back. I'll give you your counterfeit bill back, and khalas, we'll call it an end. But, for whatever reason, it's not entirely clear. They wouldn't come back into the store. So I guess the guy felt compelled to have the police called, and we know what happened.
Right, and that's why, I think in this situation, I think it's best, and we end up with some real solution-oriented thinking to humanize all of the parties involved. I have law enforcement at my neck saying, if I don't turn in these counterfeit bills, they're going to prosecute me. So we're talking about an entire ecosystem of mistrust, distrust, unjustified pressure from law enforcement. There's a lot that everybody was juggling, in that situation.
Yeah, the complexities of it, especially with the trial now, we're hearing all these different facts about it, just kind of mind-boggling. It's like, who do you blame? Where who has a part in this, or who did the right thing or wrong thing? It's really kind of ethically like a dilemma that's hard to figure out. But what's clear is the police were brutal, way beyond bounds.
Again, man, this idea, man, of respecting Black humanity and respecting Black life. I think about, 2 verses from the Quran that come to mind. One, لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, truly we have ennobled all of the children of Adam. And the other verse, and I think that every Muslim vendor, especially a Muslim vendor working in a, economically depressed community should have this ayah somewhere visible, is that you had members of the Jewish community in Medina that said, "Laysa alayna fil ummiyina sabil," that, referring to the Arabs, we don't have to deal fairly with these unlettered, illiterate Arabs, right? So that even though these people were their clientele, they felt like in a very self-serving way, they could get away with mistreating them on account of their status. Meaning the Jews felt that way about the Arabs in Medina, and God calls them liars, right? God says, no, that's a lie. The idea that you can treat somebody unjustly or unfairly or not afford them full respect on account of some arbitrary difference in social class, that's really just exploitation and manipulation. So I think, entering these communities, doing business in these communities, one has to enter as a guest, and one has to understand that, hey man, look, right now, I'm just keeping it 100. I'm doing business in a community in which some of its members are have been traumatized. Does not mean that they're not morally responsible, right? And live under disproportionate, pressure in terms of law enforcement and criminal justice. That might mean that I might have to be prepared to take a loss here, a loss there. Somebody might steal. I might have to be prepared, and it doesn't mean that I can't seek a way of dealing with that, but I should be committed to dealing with that within the community, right? I think that it's kind of like, it has to be a part of almost a personal contract, that if I'm gonna do business in this community, we're gonna have to deal with some alternative dispute, resolution. That's a part of doing business in this community.
You have to know the community if you're going to do business in it. A lot of these Arab store owners that come into Black communities, they live in the suburbs.
And that's another thing too. You have to, I think, doing business in these communities, you can't come in as a carpetbagger. You can't come in as someone unconcerned with the state of the community. You want to have a relationship with the community in which, if you experience something like that, you recognize that the person in front of you is somebody's son, somebody's husband, somebody's father, somebody's sister, somebody's mother, right? Doesn't mean that you have to have a data bank with everybody's phone numbers, but just let that inform your response. This is not just, the dregs of the community washing up in front of my store. Let me call the police and, have them come out here and clean these bums up, right? That attitude, to my mind, disqualifies you from being able to do business in those kinds of communities with moral integrity, man.
You're using, whatever power you have in society just to harm others in that regard. That's the way I look at it. Like, it's just, to me, like totally haram that you're going to sit there and put someone's life in danger over something really small.
Yeah, really trivial, man. But I think the only reason that a person arrives at that place is maybe they didn't consider the possibility of things like this happening when they started doing business there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, you're entering a community. And I think that sometimes, certain, Muslim immigrant groups and immigrant groups generally take for granted that the lack of representation in Black communities among Black small business owners and entrepreneurs is something that Black people just think is normal. I think that sometimes they assume that the idea that the beauty shop is owned by a Korean person, Walgreens is corporate, Cup Foods is owned by, somebody Palestinian, this place, that Black people look at this and think, yeah, this is normal. And I think that the feeling has to be there that, damn, I am in a community in which the members of that community are not able to open the kinds of small businesses and offer the kinds of, requisite and necessary services to their own community. And so just with that alone, you have to mind that fault line very, very closely, man. And even certain friends of mine, just certain liberties they've taken in business and in interpersonal space, it's almost like, you know, you're acting like someone that doesn't realize that they're a guest. You know, you're acting almost like, you know, a slumlord or like an overlord or someone like, you know, you ain't really got nothing better. So just take, you know, take what I give you. Now, by all accounts, I heard that Mahmoud from Cup Foods was really a good brother and had a great relationship with the community.
Yeah, that's the general perception in Minneapolis, anyways, from people who actually knew him. I had some small interactions with him, you know, back like 2010, 2011. And what people in the community said is that, you know, his family is married to people from the community, like him and his brothers, you know, so they're rooted in the community. And is what I was told is they live in the community.
Yeah,
And they,
no, and that's why I think some of this, you know, you know, I think there's a certain obsession in our social justice discourse with pointing the finger at the other. There's an obsession with that, you know, that we want to demonize others, because I think in demonizing others, the self is obscured, you know, to the one demonizing. You know, that position that was taken vis-a-vis the life of George Floyd, myself and friends of mine, you know, have taken positions that were harsher than that. You know, I'm just being real with you, Hamza. You know, I've often said, when, you know, there was a spike in home burglaries, and you know, I would say, man, if somebody even approaches my home on something like that, it ain't gonna be pretty. It ain't gonna be pretty. I mean, and this is in my community, right? So I think we all have to kind of rethink these sorts of you know, positions that I think we've taken erroneously, you know, in the past, and have to think, I think, with more compassion, you know, about our fellow man and woman, especially in these communities.
You know, in George Floyd's case in particular, I seen a picture of the counterfeit bills in question, the exact bills. And I wouldn't in no way, shape, or form know that these were counterfeit bills myself.
Some of them are real, some of them you can't really know until you touch them.
And, you know, even if we're talking about crimes that are serious crimes that someone intended to do, I think we need to always be asking the question, well, why is that person in that position to do that?
I mean, you know, again, man, I think we are asking a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, I mean, you know, but I think that it might just really come down to that, Hamza. Like, if you want to do business in these communities, you might need the heart of a wali, man.
Yeah, for real. You're going to have to let some things slide.
You have to let some things slide. You have to be a very magnanimous person, a very, you know, I mean, it comes with the territory, man. It comes with the territory. And I think that in the name of, I don't know, maybe, you know, going for mine, or not jeopardizing my business, or defending my family, or, you know, sometimes where we draw that line in terms of what we're willing to let go in a prophetic spirit of magnanimity. You know, maybe we need to push ourselves to be better in that regard.
So, you know, in Minnesota, they've been pushing to defund or abolish the police, which I think shocked the rest of the country. And so there's been some prominent sociologists. I mean, this is a theory that's been talked about for probably 70 years at least, but there's one guy, Alex Vitale, who he wrote the book, it's called The End of Policing. And basically the argument is, we've seen so many police reforms come and go, but every single reform has had zero impact on the things that happen on the ground. We've studied different police agencies or departments all across the country. Whenever reforms put in place, it doesn't change police brutality. It doesn't change how they interact with the community. And really what the big problem is that we've seen here locally in Minnesota is that the training might be very well on the police department side, but the police union has their own culture, their own training, us versus them warrior training that they do, and their own culture that they enforce among each other, where it's the point is we have to change police culture. Well, you can't, so let's abolish it and start a new type of law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, man, it's amazing when I think about, the logic of the carceral state, which is, a term that's now in vogue. But, it is interesting when one thinks about how older human societies that didn't have, police, didn't have prisons, one would almost be baffled at the fact that, these places, they function. I mean, you had harm and you had redress and, and you had community. But I think sometimes even just the way we think of the machinery of the state as being so necessary, like without that, life cannot be sustained. It's like, as you say that, you do recognize how new much of this is. This isn't meaning like, at this point, I don't know. With Pandora's box being opened, essentially, could we go back to kind of a prelapsarian kind of state? Wallahu ta'ala a'lam, right? But, sometimes I think that we have to, like in the Medina of the Prophet ﷺ, there were no police. You know what I'm saying? There were no police. You know what I'm saying?
Even the Mecca of Jahiliyyah, there really were no police.
There were no police. You know what I'm saying? So, the way that we think about the necessity of police, I think, is really an extension of the way that we think about personal property and capital. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that the necessity of law enforcement is something that developed, or the ideas developed, in a society in which slavery was a central component of that society, and great wealth disparity is a central component of that society. I think in places like that, the necessity of law enforcement, actually becomes quite clear why law enforcement is necessary.
Why it was put in place, yeah.
I was put in place in the first place.
Okay, is there any last thing that you'd like to say on this issue?
Just that I appreciate you. I appreciate, Sheikh Yusuf Rios, giving a platform to Muslims to talk about this. I was thinking the other day about why George Floyd is so important. I think that the importance of George Floyd only really comes through when we look at his background. We look at, and I mean, taking an honest look at his background. I'll say it. I mean, I know it's unpopular to say so now, but George Floyd is not a representation of the best of Black traditions and community. George Floyd is not the best of in terms of Black American moral excellence and resiliency and the ability to overcome. At least what I've heard of George Floyd's life. And nonetheless, our tradition, I think, as Muslims, and certainly our traditions as Black people, have always sought to maintain a basic dignity, a basic worthiness, a basic redemptive value in the lives of people like George Floyd. And I think that there's something deeply spiritual about that, something deeply meaning like, why the advocacy and why the work around someone like George Floyd's life is so important is because, you know, I think we're asserting very powerfully that even somebody that has had struggles and challenges, they cannot be thrown away.
That's right.
That's, you know, our tradition is one in which even those among us struggling, we maintain and assert their dignity, their beauty, their value, their importance. You understand what I'm saying? You know, yeah, exactly. You know, the Ahl Sufa, you know, it's like, no, it's like, wait, which, and that's why I don't think, you know, I think this, you know, why George Floyd is so important only really comes through when you take into account who he really was. I mean, you know, his full, everything, the good and the bad. You know, who he was as a father, who he was as a son, you know, who he was as a friend, who he was as somebody that, you know, maybe had, you know, struggles, you know, growing up, had some, you know, brushes with the law. We don't know if those were true, false, whatever. But my point, you know, of course, you know, he was self-medicating, had drugs in his system when he was killed. I think all of these, you know, facts actually lead to the place of why his life is so precious, man.
That's right.
Those are the people that the people of God should be also concerned about. It's not just
exactly
the straight A student that has never had a run-in with the law, although that person gets killed too. You know what I'm saying? And
sure
you know, the person that goes to the masjid or goes to church and was active in the community, and yeah, of course that person is very valuable and important, and we love them too. But George Floyd, now this is, we maintain a basic dignity, a basic worthiness to live and to be given the opportunity to repent and to thrive. And like, that's what it's all about, man. You know, so I feel a deep resonance with kind of what's going on and why someone like George Floyd is so important. You know, I think he's important because he doesn't represent the best of who we are, but he represents a part of who we are. You know what I'm saying?
You perfectly captured the Islamic like ethos on this. And I really want to thank you for coming and sharing your insight with us.
No, Jazakallah khair. Thanks for having me. Sheikh Hamza, man, it's always good to be on with you and to be in communication with you. I look forward to you having me on again soon, inshallah.
Inshallah, Sheikh. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.